Why am I anxious?
Well,
Joseph LeDoux.
greetings.
How are you, sir?
Very good.
Thank you so much for joining me, man. I really
Happy to be
appreciate
here.
it. I've listened to a bunch of your interviews, and I'm very, very interested to talk to you. You have quite an eclectic life, if I should say so myself. I will say, I think you're probably my favorite son of a bull riding Cajun neuroscientist. It's also the front lead singer of a band.
Yeah, I think I've got that market corner.
Yeah, I think you're the one. So obviously we're going to talk about a bunch of different things. Consciousness, the realm of existence, the amygdala, of course, parts of the brain, how all of this is working, why some people are afraid of other things and why some people aren't afraid at all. But the place that I want to start, why am I anxious?
Well, so the easy answer is through some combination of your genes and your experiences, you have more worry than other people if you think you're more anxious than other people. I mean, a lot of people are anxious today, so it's hard to know where to place the line.
Do you think people are more anxious today than they were 20 years ago, than they were 100 years ago?
You know, I used to get that question a lot, and I would always say, imagine a family of serfs living outside of a castle in the Middle Ages with the king and all of that, and everyone inside of the castle is comfortable, and all these people living on the outside, they must have been miserable and completely anxious about their lives. So anxiety is not something new. It's always going to be part of life. The philosopher Kierkegaard said that, anxiety is the price we pay for freedom. He put it in terms of the, Adam choosing to eat the apple as the man's first attempt at freedom. And because of that, every human since then has suffered anxiety because of that cost of being free. Now, I don't necessarily buy the religious story, but I think there is some truth to that we have an unusual ability to make decisions as human beings. We have much more complex brains than any other kind of animal. And so we can imagine things and do things that other animals can't do. So what I like to say about the kind of transformation of the Kierkegaard thing is a transposition, I guess you could say, is that what I think of is that the prefrontal cortex is the price we pay for anxiety. In other words, the prefrontal cortex is what allows us to anticipate the future, to plan, to reminisce about the future and the past and so forth in your conscious mind. And because we have that ability to envision things that could happen to us that are bad in the future, that's the price we pay. Anxiety is the price we pay for that ability to envision even the good stuff. I mean, it's good when we can envision happy things or things will work out creatively. But when we are constantly stuck envisioning something bad that may or may not happen just because we worry about it, then we have a problem with anxiety.
Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry to interrupt this amazing program, but I need a little bit of help. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can probably see our subscriber number right down here. And if you're able to, it would mean the world if you could subscribe. That is the best way to support this show, because when you subscribe, I'm able to show it to potential guests or to different brands and stuff like that. And it really, really helps grow the show, get us cooler guests, have cooler conversations, and it helps everything so, so much. So if you don't mind, thank you so much. Let's get back to it. That's interesting. So, I mean, would that follow to reason that other animals that seem to exhibit like behavioral or, psychological anxiety also have some semblance of future thinking, or not free will necessarily, but some ability to envision the future?
So as you go from, humans to apes, to other apes, to monkeys, and down the line evolutionarily, that's not to say that, this is some special line. It's just the line we happen to be in, and we're not special. We're just different from every other animal. And the capacities we have that allow us to do things that other animals can't do, like build buildings and, play guitars and things like that. Those don't make us better. They make us different. And so other animals, let's say monkeys, they have excellent decision-making capacities, not as sophisticated as humans, because humans can hold several things in mind at one time and be making decisions about all three sort of simultaneously, whereas monkeys can only hold one thing in mind at a time. And so they don't have that opportunity. It's not that they lose the first thing when they go to it, but they have to jump back and forth. And then lower mammals, when they have one thing in their mind, they lose it if they go to another thing. They can't go back to it as part of that thought process.
Oh, interesting. So humans can think of 2 or 3 things simultaneously.
Maybe more, but yeah.
I mean, some.
Let's say 3.
You're giving a lot of.
We're pushing it at 3.
You're pushing it at 3. I mean, I can do 2 barely. But I could think of something that's going to happen in 2 weeks, and I can also think of something that's going to happen in a year, and I can also think about what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And I can kind of do all of them simultaneously, more or less.
I mean, the key thing is that you can focus on one, and then you turn to another one. That first one doesn't go away.
Right.
It can be held in the workspace.
There's a
called
psychological
working memory.
permanence.
It's not permanent, but it's there temporarily to work on. So you can like call that up, put it aside right here in the same space, look up another thing, think about that, and maybe think about how those two relate, and maybe think of a third thing and how it relates to all 3. Because you can hold all of those in mind in working memory. Working memory is a workplace where you temporarily do mental work. And the human brain can hold several things in mind, going back and forth, focus on one, you don't lose the other 2. But monkeys will lose the second. If they go to a second one, they lose the monkeys can go to a second and come back to it, but they can't put them together so easily.
That makes sense.
And then the other, like rats and other kind of mammals, dogs and cats, can only hold one thing in mind, and that's it.
And when they go back to something, they're starting
over,
brand new.
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And so because of the complexity of our minds and our ability to sort of juggle a bunch of different things and kind of look at how they're all connected and related to each other and find those intersections, that's going to induce more intersections for anxiety. Exactly. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, that's the price we pay.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess, because I guess all anxiety is sort of, it's kind of intrinsic to the condition is that you are thinking about future events, that there is some type of thing that you're looking to, either in the immediate future or the distant future, that then is bringing about a sense of dread or nervousness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between fear and anxiety. Fear is an emotion about something that is here. You're afraid that thing is going to do something to you. Whereas anxiety, the fear is not there. The danger is not there. It's just possibly going to be there, or it may never happen.
So many animals experience fear. Fear is a pretty common trait amongst.
Well, it depends on what you mean by fear. And I've been on I would say now it's been a 12-year rant about fear because I'd been studying animals' responses to danger and discovering the role of the amygdala and all of that for many, many years. And the procedure we used was called Pavlovian fear conditioning. So it's like, Pavlov's dog, when he tastes the meat, if they ring the bell at the same time, then he salivates next time he hears the bell. Well, with fear conditioning, it's kind of the same thing, except it's you hear the bell or the sound, but you have something unpleasant happen to you, like a mild shock to the feet of the rats. So what the rat then, when it hears the sound, will freeze because that's what many animals do, including humans, as a sudden response to either an actual threat or something that's predicting a threat. So the question is, we have no bloody idea what's going on in the head of a mouse or a rat or even a dog or a cat. We can estimate from their behavior, but the problem is behavior is a very inaccurate readout of the mind. Why? Well, there are multiple levels of behavioral control in the brain. For example, the lowest level is a reflex. So you step on something sharp, you lift your foot. Yeah. All right. Or if you are startled by something that you freak out like that. But these are automatic built-in responses in the nervous system that are so useful that they become hardwired like that. The next level up are what the behavioral biologists or ethologists called instincts, fixed action patterns. They're like reflexes in that they're automatically elicited by a stimulus, but they're more complex kinds of responses. Reflexes tend to involve single muscle groups or, coordinated sets of muscle groups, whereas a fixed action pattern or instinct is more of a whole body kind of coordination. You're not just freezing or lifting your leg. You might be running away from something or retracting from something, avoiding something.
So what would be an example of this?
Well, so let's say freezing is an example. It's not a reflex. It's a whole body movement in response to a danger. So a rat is walking around, all of a sudden the sound goes on that's been paired with shock. The rat will freeze dead in its tracks. Now, you think that's a simple kind of behavior, but every muscle in the body is, kind of frozen to reduce any kind of movement. The only thing they move is their head back and forth slightly just to check the scene, see what's going on. And it's very small and sudden. Now, the reason that freezing is so important is because predators respond to movement. So if you remain still, the predator may get bored and then go off and do something else. But as soon as you move, bam, they're going to attack. So it's a whole body innate program that keeps you alive in a dangerous situation by not doing anything.
Would you say that is still non-conscious? Like a reflex is non-conscious?
We haven't gotten anywhere near it.
We're not even close to conscious?
No.
Okay.
Next level up is a habit, stimulus response habit. So, you learn to you do something over and over again, and you do it so many times that you no longer have to think about it. So this was kind of discovered scientifically as a research tool in the late 1900s by a guy named Thorndike. And so what he did was he put a cat into a box that had kind of latches and stuff and strings all over. And the cat was a little food deprived, so it was a little hungry. And so he put a piece of fish outside the box. And the cat is in the box, and it sees the fish. It's pissed off that it can't get to the fish, so it's like walking around and doing things. And it bumps into something, and the door opens. So it goes and gets the fish. The next day, same thing. Might not quite have put it together, but tries other things, but then bumps the door again, and then it opens. So soon he learns that every time he bumps the door, he can eat the fish. So there are two ways that could be thought about. One as a habit that you see the fish, you see the door, you bump the door so you can get the fish. Or it could be a goal-directed habit, goal-directed action. The difference is a goal-directed action is something that you cognitively have to represent in your mind, a goal in your mind, and make a plan to achieve that goal. A habit is automatic. You see the stimulus, you respond. You see the stimulus, you respond. And once those habits are sort of encrusted or built into your basal ganglia, part of the brain, subcortical brain, which is important for a lot of kind of sophisticated behaviors. What happens then is the habit becomes unchangeable. It becomes resistant to change because it's been wired in so strong. So that's why, if you bite your fingernails or something, it's hard to stop. Or you take drugs and get addicted, it's hard to stop because the habit system is so strong.
And neurologically, those synapses, like those neural pathways, are carved out. Is that true when you're creating a habit?
They're what?
Like the neural pathways are actually like carved.
Well,
like
the pathway's already there.
Okay.
You don't grow new pathways across the brain like that. What happens is a neuron has a cell body. All cells have a cell body. Neurons, in addition, have these fibers that go out. One is called an axon, and that can go some distance away from the neuron. And the axon, the end of the axon, is the place where a neurotransmitter is released. So when a neuron is active, it fires an electrical impulse called an action potential. That action potential starts in the cell body, goes down the axon step by step, kind of propagated down the axon. And when it gets to the end, the electrical response causes the opening up of the vesicles that hold the transmitter, and the transmitter is released into the so-called synapse. And as the transmitter crosses the synapse, that causes the next neuron to fire. And the next one and so forth, yeah.
Interesting.
So the more times you do that, or let's say each time you do that, the connection gets stronger and stronger. It gets to, and more transmitters released and more over and over again, so that then it's very solidified. And that way it's hard to break because it's been ingrained in a sense.
And now, have you ever heard these things? It's a little bit of a detour, but have you heard these things that you can, if you do something for 21 days, it'll create a habit. It'll basically make those synapses stronger.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the more you do something, the more likely it becomes a habit. Let's say you have some guitars here. So if you practice every day, you get better, and it becomes habitual. You know how to reach the chords, and they can just play it. The first time you try to play the guitar, it's like your fingers are all over the place, right? But then it becomes a habit, and you just pick the guitar up, and you can form those chords, and that's that without thinking about it. Someone says play a C chord, you don't say, you just do it.
It just is. It's the synapses are so strong in your mind that your brain just knows exactly where to go without really thinking about it. Interesting.
Okay, so we talked about 3 kinds of responses that are controlled unconsciously: reflexes, instincts or fixed action patterns, and habits. The next level is what I call goal-directed behaviors. A few minutes earlier, goal-directed behaviors again have an internal representation of the goal. So let's say if you are in a restaurant and you love nice cold raw oysters, and you eat some raw oysters, and then 2 hours, 3 hours later you get sick because they weren't properly treated or there was some bacteria in it. Now, normally, and so what you have to do, you form a connection in your mind between the fact that you feel sick now, the nausea, and that you ate oysters. Okay, that's a 2-hour space. If you try to do Pavlovian conditioning in an experiment with the tone appears now, and then you have to wait 2 hours for the shock, be like the taste of the oyster is now, but the effect of the oyster is 2 hours later. If you have to do that in an experiment, it doesn't work because it's not Pavlovian conditioning per se.
It needs to be instantaneous.
It's a kind of Pavlovian conditioning because normally you need that close association, the overlap of the 2 stimuli, the unconditioned stimulus like the tone, the conditioned stimulus like the shock. But with this kind of taste learning, it's more of a it's kind of a natural thing that animals have learned in the wild because they don't get sick immediately when they eat something bad. There's a time course between the eating and the sickness. And nature has figured out a way to allow that kind of learning to connect back in time. Right?
So you think all animals do that?
Well, certainly all mammals. I'm not sure about other species.
So if a mammal, like a dog or something, eats a spicy pepper off the ground, there's a branch with habaneros, and it eats it, and it feels the sensation, and its stomach hurts.
Yeah.
It is able to make a memory and say, that's not what I need.
Right.
And then that's able to pass on.
This actually came up, it was discovered by sheep herders in the West, that their sheep would eat something and then get sluggish. And then the farmer noticed they would never eat that thing again that they ate and identified through this kind of memory as dangerous. So the key thing is that over the 2-hour period, what's being associated is not the taste with the sickness anymore, but the memory of the taste and the sickness. So it's a cognitive representation. And a lot of our behavior is like that, it's based on these internal representations. So that is that's not necessarily conscious. I wouldn't even say it's conscious, but it's cognitive. So the next level then is to have these kinds of conscious representations. And for that, we need a mental model, which is a situational, contextual, it's what is going on in this situation. So you and I are in this indoor tent, and we know exactly what this is. We know it's an interview. You've done lots of interviews. I've had lots of interviews. So we don't have to kind of guess what's going to happen. We just know. We have a mental model of what an interview is. I've never been at an interview in a tent, but now I have that mental model.
Exactly.
Too.
So for your next one, you'll
Thank
be prepared.
you for that.
Yeah, of course. Gotcha.
So, so the mental model is it puts you in the kind of situation you're in. So if you go out with your friends tonight in the bar, you're in a different mental model, and different things are going on. Or if you're in a movie theater, it's a different thing. You're in a restaurant, it's a different thing. We have these with things called schema that we acquire as we go through life. Schema are situational memories about specific kinds of things that you do in your life. And so the schema are the basis of the mental model. You walk into a situation, the sensory systems pick up what's going on in that situation. Though that information is combined with memory, and once that's combined, you now have a perception rather than a sensation. Perception is a meaningful sensation.
Right.
And that meaningful sensation then opens up this kind of bag of goods about such situations and assembles a situation of the moment in your head. So the scheme, you get the interview schema or the basketball game schema.
The
or
movie theater schema.
Whatever schema. And that schema becomes then how you start to make predictions, mental model kinds of predictions, cognitive predictions about what to do in that situation. Now you've got the situation mapped out in your head, but now you have to figure out how to do it because there are lots of things you possibly could do. So that's when we get now into the level of the conscious realm, which is the mental model itself is not conscious. In my theory, what consciousness is a readout of the mental model. It's a narrative readout. You've created this situation psychologically through the cognitive processes, and now, and that situation has all kinds of inputs. It's got, sights and sounds and whatever's going on in your body, and especially if it's an arousing situation, you might be tense or you might be joyous or whatever. But a lot goes on in a complex situation. All of those things are encoded differently in the brain. And what the mental model does is it puts all of those things together into one episode of the moment.
And when you say mental model, I just want to be clear. The mental model is your brain effectively attempting to create some type of simplicity with all of the data that's happening in your mind. Is that fair to say?
It's trying to create a complex situation that is representative of what is going on around you and what you need to do to deal with what's going on around you.
Got it. And this is happening automatically.
Yeah. And so once that mental model is created, then you have to turn that into various things. You might want to talk about it. You might want to act on it in a goal-directed way, choose an action to do. Or, in addition, and you want to be conscious of it. Those are the three things that go on. Now, because the neural pathways that control your actions and your speech and that give your conscious experiences its content, those are different pathways out of the mental model. Those are different pathways out of the mental model. And because of that, there can be additional processing So you start with one narrative that's been, the story's been compressed into a narrative code, which I'll explain in a second, that then goes to all three of those things, to speech, to behavior, goal-directed behavior, and to conscious content.
And when you say conscious content, is that awareness of your
The
consciousness?
awareness of the mental model and the world, and the situation.
So it needs those three things: speech, behavior, and awareness.
You don't need them all. You can speak without being conscious. Like almost everything I'm saying here, I'm not consciously planning. I've got a schema of the situation. I know what we're talking about. You ask me a question that activates a schema, puts me in. The door was open. Okay,
sorry about that. You can keep going.
So
you're not conscious. You just have a schema of interview, and so now you say, okay, now I'm going to share this component,
and I just start talking, and I'm not planning anything. You stop me, and then I have to think.
Right.
That's when I'm consciously talking.
Right, but you didn't plan every word for the next hour.
I didn't know. No, I have no plan.
Right.
And so the conscious content of the moment is one of the narrative outputs of the mental model. So is speech, and so is goal-directed behavior. Now, those are three very different things. And so the pathways that generate them are going to be different, right? That's why what you say and what you do in a situation don't always coincide. Maybe, but sometimes it's not the same thing.
Like, do you have an example of that offhand?
Let's say you...
Like, I can think of, maybe tell me if this would be one. Like, I tell people all the time, don't eat sugar, and you should work out every day.
Yeah.
But then when I wake up, I eat sugar, and I might not work out. So I know in my brain, I'm saying
that's not in real time. Though in real time, let's say you're having an argument with your friend or partner or something.
And I say, stop yelling at me. We shouldn't yell at each other.
Yeah, right. So the speech might be, I hate you, right? But let's say your actions are aggressive, right? But you're talking in a nice way. Okay, so you're talking to your friend or partner in a nice way, but the partner can tell that you're snarling and so, but you're not necessarily planning that. It's just kind of coming out.
What about like cuteness aggression? Like where you hold something so cute, like a little kitten,
right?
And like you grit your teeth and like you grimace, and you're like you almost get an aggressive behavioral component. But your speech and the way you're talking about this thing is, I love you so much, you're so cute. Yeah. Would that be an example of your brain and your speech and your behavior being antithetical?
And both of those can differ from what you're conscious of. Because you sometimes say stuff and you ask yourself, why did I say that? Or in an argument, you say something and you know it's wrong, right? But what are you going to correct it?
But you need to say something and it sounds good in the argument, so you just say it.
Yeah. It's just like, you're awful, I don't like you. But you don't really mean it, right? And you hear it and you say, no, I didn't mean that. So do you then apologize, or do you take the, I can't apologize. She's done something to me, so I got to keep going.
Right. What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because it's 2024 and it's time to talk about something important. When you are seriously hurt, your injury could be worth millions. Yes, that's right. The world is a crazy place, and one person's negligence can result in another's settlement. And that's why I got to talk to you about Morgan & Morgan. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide and over 1,000 lawyers. Yes, these are the big boys. You know them, you see their billboards all over the world. If you ever drove down I-90 from Florida to New York, I'm telling you, you've seen the billboards, all right? Have you ever watched a UFC fight? You've seen them right on the banner. I'm telling you, these are the biggest guys in the game, all right? With over $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients, Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting to get you full and fair compensation. The annoying thing with most attorneys is that in order to submit a claim, you got to call them up, you got to talk to their people, you got to go back and forth on emails, you got to hope that they see it. They might charge you just to even look at their claim. Here's the cool thing with Morgan & Morgan. With 8 clicks or less, you can submit a claim, and one of their licensed attorneys will take a look at it and get back to you. It's that easy. It's like ordering something off Amazon. It's just a couple clicks. You can submit your claim very easily and cheap. Yeah, how about $0? That's how much it costs to submit a claim with Morgan & Morgan. Extremely easy, no fee required. So, if you are ever injured, you can go check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. That's right, unless they win for you. Unless they fight and get you compensation, you're not paying a single dollar. That's a pretty good deal. So, for more information, go to forthepeople.com/Gagnon. That's correct, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, that's pound 529 from your cell phone. That's for the people, forthepeople.com/Gagnon, or dial pound law, pound 529 from your cell phone. This is a paid advertisement. Now let's get back to the show after this short disclaimer. So this is your brain basically having those 3 sort of separate, this mental model that has these 3 kind of different outputs, I guess you could say.
Right.
It's trying to take in all of this data of your existence and all of your past and all of the things that your brain has ever consumed and everything it's consuming right now. And this mental model is putting into those 3 different little channels. Right. And they're different from each other. So as a result, you can have 3 different behaviors all happening from the same mental model at any given time.
Not only that, once you're conscious of the mental model, you can then have goal-directed behavior and speech from that as well.
Simultaneously. Is that in addition to the 3?
Well, you never know. The point is you never know if you're just watching someone or the person's in an experiment. You don't know which middle model, the conscious or the non-conscious middle model, is controlling which behavior. Is it goal-directed and conscious, or is it just goal-directed? Are you speaking consciously, or are you just speaking through the narrative? So this is a complicated thing, right? And this is brand new in my new book, The 4 Realms of Existence. But the point is that if we know the complications, we can try to understand them as features of the brain rather than as impediments to our understanding. And I think the most important thing is that what is that narrative that's coming out that can talk to speech, to goal-directed behavior, and populate consciousness? What kind of thing is that? And this is the interesting part. It's called an amodal language of thought.
An amodal language of thought.
So language of thought is something popularized by the philosopher Jerry Fodor in the 1980s. But he thought of it more as kind of like real language. But the current view, and I subscribe to this, is that it's not anything, it's not a language. The language of thought that enters our consciousness is not verbal or visual or auditory or anything else. It's amodal. It's abstract. You've taken all these inputs, collapsed them down into a kind of gestalt whole, and now they are read out through an abstract amodal pathway that splits and goes to goal-directed behavior for your actions, to speech. So it has no particular modality. It can be used in different output modalities.
So when I wake up and I go to the gym in the morning, I don't say to myself, now I'm going to go to the gym. Now I'm going to put on my shoes. It is just behavior that I've done for a long time. It's habitual. It's ingrained in my mind, and I know that I do it every day. And so as a result, those things and those processes that I'm doing just exist. When I walk to the gym, I'm just sort of on autopilot, so to speak. And if a car drives in front of me and I stop, like that is reflexive, and I'm not consciously thinking of all these things all the time. And I guess, would you say that is the amodal sort of language of thought?
Well, the amodal language of thought is involved in everything you think and say and do.
Always.
I don't think. Well, I guess it's possible. Let me think about it. It's possible that from speech itself, you could have direct connections to the motor control regions that might allow you to act on the basis for your speech to control it. But I think the more interesting thing is how it all kind of comes together and is through one system like that. Now, I gave this lecture at Yale a few months ago, and a very smart young graduate student said she thinks she has a way to separate, to define when we're talking based on the non-conscious mental model versus the conscious. And what it is, she said, well, if you're consciously talking, there's going to be less jumping around from sentence of the content from sentence to sentence. It's going to be more thematic within the paragraph. Whereas if it's the unconscious mental model, it's going to be jumping around more because you don't have that kind of extra control level in there. And this has been used in analyzing text and all kinds of things in psychology. And it's kind of like an AI program where you can analyze the flow and content of things.
And you subscribe to that as well?
I subscribe to it, yeah. I mean, I think it sounds cool. We haven't tried it.
Yeah. So I guess the deliberation of the thought is a way to discern.
Yeah.
If everything someone is saying is very linear, it's all very cogent and all working all together, you would say it's conscious.
No, sometimes it's just flowing good, but if you're driving down the road, everything's cool. You're thinking about something else, and then a car comes close to you, and you shift into, alertness. And so then you start driving more consciously.
Mm-hmm. And what is the importance of being able to discern that? Like, why is that valuable to us? Being able to say, oh, now someone is speaking consciously or someone is speaking in thought
I don't know.
unconsciously.
It could be important in analyzing, for example, what politicians say, and what negotiators say.
Interesting. In what capacity?
Well, like if you're trying to determine whether someone is being truthful or not, I'm not sure which way it would go. Would the liar have lied so many times that it sounds more coherent? That's possible.
Interesting.
But I guess what I'm saying is there could be. You could tell the difference, perhaps, but not necessarily know which one it was in complex life like that.
So all of these different mental models and all of these sort of languages of thought, you think are all sort of working together to create what we understand as consciousness?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many theories of consciousness, and there's no agreement on which one is the top gun, but I've been doing consciousness since 1974 when I did my PhD, studying split brain patients and consciousness, and that was I've been thinking about that ever since, like 50 years now. I was there were two things you couldn't really work on in the 1970s, 80s. One was consciousness, and the other was emotion, because it was a kind of consciousness. The neuroscience community did not accept those as like real topics. Mm-hmm. My first grant submitted in 1985, called something like the neural pathways of emotion, was rejected because neuroscientists don't study emotion. That was what the reviewer said. So, well, it pissed me off, but I also, I'm pretty good at bouncing back after being pissed off. So I rewrote the grant, changed the title, added a couple of things that the guy didn't like, or gal, or whatever it was. And I got the grant. And in fact, I didn't just get it, but the agency, the National Institute of Mental Health, turned it into what's called a merit award. So instead of giving me a 5-year grant, they gave me a 10-year grant. And then they renewed that 10-year grant 10 years later. So I had 20 years of funding from that grant.
Wow.
So even though the guy didn't like it at first, it paid off.
Wow.
You got to stick with it even though you get hit down.
And that was specifically studying emotion.
Well, it's studying Pavlovian conditioning, and so-called fear conditioning. And why was I doing that after studying consciousness in split brain patients? Well, at the time, the techniques available to study the human brain were quite limited. And what I wanted to study was consciousness or emotion I wanted to study. And I thought, well, let me go back to the split brain again. So one of the things we found in the split brain patient that has been on my mind for literally 50 years, we had a patient where we presented, well, let me say what a split brain patient is, because not everybody's going to know what that is. These are people who have intractable epilepsy. This was in the 1970s. The medications weren't helping these people very much. They were having seizures all the time. Many of them were like teenagers, and so they had their whole lives ahead of them, even though they had had terrible lives up until that point because they had no social life. They're just so sick. So I don't know who figured out if you go and split the brain in half, they're going to be better. But it's kind of like, really? It seems radical. It was radical. But the surgeons had figured this out somehow, and they would separate the two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, from being connected anymore. The corpus callosum, the pathway that goes between the two sides, meant that when that's separated, section, means that everything, it's like everything you do in Vegas stays in Vegas. Everything the right hemisphere does stays in the right hemisphere. Everything the left hemisphere does stays in the left hemisphere. But you can see your behavior. Each hemisphere can see the behavior of the other, what the other is doing. So the left hand is controlled by the right hemisphere. Opposite hand, right hemisphere controls left hand. Left hemisphere controls right hand. So if you put a picture on a screen and there's a dot in the middle of the screen, and you tell the patient to stare at that dot, everything to the left will go to the right hemisphere. Everything to the right will go to the left hemisphere. Mm-hmm. So you put a picture of an apple on the left side, goes to the right hemisphere. You say, what did you see? The guy said, left hemisphere is where language is. The guy says, I didn't see anything.
Really?
The left hemisphere doesn't have that
They're
information.
not talking to each other.
But
he's able to see the apple.
No, because it was flashed briefly to the left side of the screen. Left side didn't see that because the left side is looking at the right side of the screen. So the right hemisphere sees the apple. Left hemisphere doesn't see anything. But then you have the left hand from the right hemisphere point to what it saw, and it points to a picture of an apple. And now the left hemisphere sees the apple. So, and it makes up a story. Oh, yeah, I saw that.
But he has no conscious thought or conscious memory of seeing it.
It never saw it. But he's telling a story that makes his behavior make sense. He doesn't want to look like a fool. He says, yeah, I saw the apple.
But his eyes did see it, and
the left hemisphere. See, each eye goes to both hemispheres.
Right.
But if you're staring at a dot, everything to the left goes to the right hemisphere. Mm-hmm.
And so because they're not talking to each other,
only the right hemisphere saw the apple.
Wow.
But when the left hand from the right hemisphere points to the apple, the left hemisphere can say, "Oh yeah, I saw an apple." It makes it up. It tells a story
to fill in the gap,
to not be embarrassed about not knowing what was going on.
I mean, it's so bizarre.
And so we did this study where we put two things. There was a snow scene. This was up in Vermont. A snow scene on the left side, and a chicken claw on the right side. So the country boy knows about chickens and knows about snow. And so the left side sees the snow scene. That goes to the right hemisphere. Mm-hmm. The right side goes to the left hemisphere, where it saw a chicken claw over there, and that goes to the left hemisphere. So now now the two hands each point to something.
Yep.
The right hand's pointing to a shovel. I'm sorry. The right hand's pointing to a chicken, and the left hand's pointing to a shovel. So the you say, why did you do that? Talking to the left hemisphere. He said, well, I saw a chicken claw, so I pointed to a chicken with my right hand.
Makes sense.
And then he said, and you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed. The left hemisphere didn't see the snow scene. The left hemisphere had no idea what that was, but the right hemisphere saw the snow scene, point to the shovel with the left hand. And so the left hemisphere is now seeing the left-hand finger point to the shovel, and he sees the chicken and the shovel, and he says, you need a shovel to clean out the chicken shed.
So you just make up a story to fill in the gap between these two things that your brain is able to point to acknowledge, but is not able to actually cognitively put the story together.
Exactly. Now, you say, okay, well, that's a neurological problem. Neurological patients confabulate all the time. But my mentor and I, Mike Kazana was my mentor, and we were good buddies. And we're up in Vermont, staying in some crappy hotel, some motel. And so we find a nice restaurant to go hang out, eat some food, and have some Jack Daniels. And so, after a couple of Jack Daniels, we're like kind of going a little wild, speculating, well, what the hell was going on that day? And, the conversation evolved, and what we kind of ended up concluding was, this is not some unusual thing in life. This is not just because the guy has his brain split in half that this is happening. This is what we do all the time. Splitting his brain in half just gives us the opportunity to actually see how that works, because we know it's impossible for his left hemisphere to have seen the chicken to point to the shovel.
Right.
So we just thought, okay, well, this is how we all go about our lives. We have so many unconscious systems in our brain, all those things I was telling you about, that control our behavior. And when we see our brain controlling behaviors that we didn't consciously control, it's a source of cognitive dissonance. It's not, it makes you feel uncomfortable because you didn't do it. You're supposed to be the boss of your body, right?
Right.
I mean, the whole Christian religion is based on you are in control of your body.
Right.
If you sin, you're going to hell.
Free will.
And the legal system, it's your body. If you do it, it's yours. So, but what we're thinking is that we're thinking, and I think it's still true, is that we spin narratives all the time to make sense of our lives. Again, going back to the examples we were talking about, where you're having an argument and you say something, you regret it instantly, but your pride won't let you take it back, so you just keep fighting. Or if you can rise above that and take it back, then you kind of shut it down right there, and it doesn't escalate into an argument.
Right.
So it's all about the narrations. We're constantly narrating. Our mind is a gigantic narrator.
If these things are happening in our mind all the time, right, where we just are sort of filling in gaps for things that our brain is taking in, and we're just automatically doing it, how many people would you say are just on autopilot, where they're just going through days and years of their life without
I think
really,
we all are,
all the time?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you step back and let's talk about 3 kinds of consciousness before we go further, because I think that will, it gives a kind of foundation for thinking about some of these things, including something you said earlier. So the smartest psychologist since William James is the father of American psychology in the late 19th century. But the next guy in line for the Genius Award in psychology is Endel Tulving. He died recently. He is the person who invented the distinction between semantic and episodic memory. Semantic memory is memory for facts and concepts, but it's not personal. Episodic memory is memories about your personal life, things that have happened to you over the course of your life. And then there's a third kind of memory called procedural memory, which is more routine. So it's like automatic habits and things you just do over and over again. But then he assigned each of those a kind of consciousness. In other words, the basis of a kind of consciousness. So episodic memory of your personal life.
Right. So if my mom has blonde hair, that would be episodic memory. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Or is that too factual?
That's kind of factual. It may be episodic to you because it's personal, but and most episodic memories have factual components.
So what's an example of episodic memory?
Let's say you're going to go back to your family's home or town in Montreal and visit a restaurant. Okay, you've been to Montreal before. So instead, let's go to, have you ever been to Torino in Italy? Okay, so you're going to go to Torino on a trip, and you're excited because they have great food there. So you find a great restaurant, you look at the menu, browse it, you know exactly what you're going to order when you get there. You know what it looks like. You've seen the pictures on the inside and the outside. So you get there, and you go in, you order the dish you plan, and you eat it. Later, you remember it as a personal episode. But let's say you never made it to the restaurant. All you had was your survey of the menu beforehand and the pictures. That would be just a factual memory. But episodic memory, you have the ambiance of the meal.
I can smell it.
The smell,
it's experiential.
The sounds, the Italian chicken.
It's an experiential thing.
Right.
Experiential memory versus just sort of like a data-fed memory.
And, John Locke, he didn't know what, he was a philosopher in the 17th century, British philosopher. He didn't know episodic and somatic memory, but he said something that is basically in line with episodic memory, which is the way we know that we are the same person today as we were when we were a child is because we have memory that is continuous through that time. So we can remember that. And then later, another psychologist in modern times, Jerome Bruner, said that our minds are storied or narrative-like in structure, that the way we know that we are a single unity and that we persist over time is because we create narrations and we update them all the time, revise them, change them. Our narrations are constantly on the move.
Right.
And that's how my mentor, Mike Gazzaniga, and I were thinking about what these things that people were doing to explain their behavior was all about. That we have all these non-conscious systems in our brain that producing these behaviors, and it's disturbing that, when you're not in control of yourself, if you believe you have free will. So we generate these stories that kind of seam it all together. We narrate it, and then we narrate it again. There's a story about these, I think it was a Vietnam War veteran who was a war hero, and he went from town to town telling his heroic story. And it started out, one way at the beginning, and each stop, it got more and more heroic. By the end, he was like a mega hero.
Yeah.
So the more we tell ourselves this stuff, the more we believe it, And this is like, we can jump right into politics here because politics today is all narratives, You have a narrative on one side and a narrative on the other side. And sometimes within each side, you have multiple narratives going on. And that's where all our stories come from and all our beliefs. Once you buy into a narrative as a belief, then that belief becomes a dogma, and you can't change it.
And why are our brains so obsessed with narrative and storytelling?
It just allows us to maintain a sense of unity that, given all the diverse systems in our brain that can do things, it's useful for our conscious mind to kind of confabulate the fact that we don't have control over everything, but it's a source of anxiety if we don't. So we just kind of wipe that away. And it also allows us to know that we lived in the past as ourselves, as a child, that we grew up. We had a day, we had a birthday. We don't remember that, it's too young, but by the time you're 2 or 3, you're beginning to have these kind of episodic memories and conscious memories of your experiences, although they're always colored by the family picture albums, and you see those and forget them, but then that's how you remember your life. From those stills, a whole narrative develops around those. That seems like you knew that stuff, but it was too early in your life.
Interesting. So you create fake memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
All memories are kind of fake in a sense.
All memories are fake. What do you mean by that?
Well, then it's the thing you remember is never exactly the thing that you experienced. It's always going to be somewhat different because when you put it into the brain, it's not like it goes into a warehouse and is locked up. It goes into the brain as information that is kind of distributedly, the brain is kind of, it's like the brain is deciding where, what it's like. Imagine kind of an AI system that's sorting what's coming in and saying, yeah, this goes with that kind of stuff, and this goes with that kind of stuff, and this goes with that kind of stuff. And then later, when you recall it, you got to put it back together. And how many of those little separate things you were able to pull together, you don't know. But you only need a few to kind of give enough to narrate it as you think it happened.
And the things you don't remember, your brain just fills in.
Yeah.
And you truly feel like, oh, I was wearing a blue shirt when this happened. But your brain just made it up.
Right. And, that's why two people on a vacation have completely different memories of what they saw and the author, I'm not going to say her name, a famous author and her husband were once on vacation. And I think it was like at Cape Cod or something. And he remembers the beautiful swan in the pond off of the porch deck. And she remembers that happening in California or something, so one different parts of the country. So they had the same experience about the same thing, but the place that it happened was completely different in their memory.
Interesting. So how important is it that we tell ourselves stories that are beneficial and help our lives rather than negative? Like, is it possible that if you just tell yourself the same negative story over and over, that thing could become, obviously we've heard that trope, like, oh, if you tell yourself a bad story, you'll end up believing it. But is it true that within our brains neurologically that we can create a false image of ourselves based off of the stories that we tell ourselves?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, definitely. For example, the diagnosis explosion for children. Many kids have some kind of diagnosis now. Families often want a diagnosis to, explain why my child is not doing as best, what we wanted it to do.
ADD, ADHD, autism, things like that.
And, I've just heard this from students that saying, that, we all have diagnoses, of some kind. And so once you have a diagnosis, you think of yourself as an anxious person or a depressed person. So they're trying to get away from that kind of talk because it's not like you are a schizophrenic. You might have schizophrenic. You have schizophrenia. You might have problems, but schizophrenia itself, none of these things are real things. These are categories: fear, anxiety, schizophrenia. These are all categories that are made up to kind of put symptoms into a group. But now it's known that, for example, it used to be that you would say, well, okay, if your heart's beating faster and you're worried about something, then you have anxiety. But if you look at across all kinds of conditions where there's some kind of, a person is anxious no matter what in a medical condition, right? Or even a psychological condition. You're anxious about what's going on. So anxiety is going to be there all the time. So there's a movement in psychiatry to kind of play down the names of categories and talk more about symptoms.
Interesting, because there's a difference between someone that gets anxiety and someone that has anxiety frequently or has anxiety all the time. Is that a fair assessment? Like,
I'm not sure. I don't know if I could say that.
Because we all have anxiety.
Yeah, but it's a feature of human nature.
It's intrinsic to being a human being. We all are going to be anxious.
Right. So
what is the diagnosis of quote unquote anxiety? Like, it seems discretionary.
Yeah.
Oh, you're anxious.
If it interferes with your routine life.
But if your routine life is doing anxiety-inducing things, does that make you an anxious person, or does that just mean what you're doing is inducing anxiety?
If it makes you unhappy and it's interfering with your ability to be do your job, to be a parent, to be a teacher, whatever, then you have a problem that you need help with. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have, that you can't fix it. I mean, a lot of these things are narratives, right? That once you adopt the narrative of a condition and begin to live that narrative, it's harder to manage in a sense because you're locked into it. Once you've adopted the narrative,
right? I have ADHD.
Yeah,
that is who I am, and
right.
so everything I do is going to be underneath this lens.
But I think the good news is that because narratives are told to yourself, you tell them to yourself, you can learn a new narrative.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because you are a man who needs a personal shopper. Yeah, I said it. You need someone that's going to shop for you. Now, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to go check out my good friends over at Bespoke Post. All right. These guys do something absolutely amazing. Okay. They scour the internet, every single corner and recess of the internet, to find the coolest items that you want, that you didn't even know that you needed. I'm telling you, this stuff is amazing. I went on Bespoke Post. I submitted kind of just like a very like regular onboarding quiz. It was like 10 questions or less. It was super easy. And it just asked kind of the things that I like to do. I like to hike. I like to go camping. I like to have a couple drinks with the boys. You know what I mean? Just kind of what my lifestyle is. And then within a couple days, they sent me this box. I submitted my questionnaire and I got a box of amazing finds. This is an amazing leather wallet. This is like a beautiful wallet that I would actually use. This is the name is Swedish for first, which makes a lot of sense because this is a perfect starter wallet. If you're someone that's looking to get into the nice crafted leather wallet game, throw your Velcro nonsense away, okay? And with the Bespoke Post, you're going to be getting something delivered directly to your door that's going to be a great first step into the leather wallet game. But that's not it. I also got this sick multi-tool right here. It's a bottle opener, which is probably what I'll be using it for the most. But then it can do everything. It can do a bunch of stuff. It can pry stuff. You can cut stuff, cut open packages. I even use this just like in my sock, just like walking around the city. You'd never realize how many times you gotta like open a package. You need a screwdriver to screw something in. You need a bottle opener. It's a multi-tool that can do a ton of stuff. It's made out of stainless steel. It's super nice. It's not gonna rust. It's airport safe. Bespoke Post is not gonna get you caught in a jam. And here's what's amazing about it. You only pay for what you keep. So before they even send it to you, they show you everything that's going to be coming in, and they say, hey, Mark, we looked at your whole profile. We looked at who you are. We think we know you better than you know you. And this is what we think you're going to love. Fortunately for me, I loved everything. So I was like, yeah, send me all that. That looks awesome. I'm going to be using all of this stuff. But if you're not like me and you're like, actually, I don't really drink that much anymore, I'm not going to take the bottle opener. They go, hey, that's fine. We'll keep it and we're not going to charge you. So if you are interested in joining one of the coolest membership clubs on the internet, having the greatest items across the web delivered directly to your door for an extremely affordable price, I want you to check out bespokepost.com. That is BESPOKEPOST.com/Camp Gagnon. That's CAMPGAGNON, but you already know that. Bespokepost.com/Camp Gagnon. And if you use the promo code Camp Gagnon, you are going to receive 15% off your first monthly shipment. Just click the link in the description. That is bespokepost.com/Camp Gagnon. Stop wasting time. You need to get on this right away and get all of your goodies sent directly to your door immediately. Now let's get back to the show. Yeah, how do people break their existing narratives to create better, more productive narratives?
This is something that is happening in psychotherapy now that help people re-narrate the things that are that they're kind of stuck on, and I think that's going to be very useful. And all of the things that used to be like sort of laughed at, like meditation and so forth, and I think that is a very, very helpful component to certainly for anxiety to kind of calm down. Problem with I've done a bit of meditation, and the problem is that the time you need it the most when you're really anxious is the hardest time to do it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why it's a life. I think it's probably, to work really well, it's got to be a lifelong kind of commitment.
Yeah. Habituation. You're just constantly meditating every day or whatever the thing is.
I didn't finish the memory and consciousness thing. Can I go back to that?
Yeah, please.
So we talked about episodic memory. And the other kind of memory is semantic memory. Episodic memory is associated with a kind of consciousness called autonoetic consciousness. It's self-awareness consciousness. And many people think that's a kind of human, unique, pretty special human capacity. Noetic consciousness is more about semantic and factual information, conceptual information. Other animals clearly have semantic memory, but but it would be nonverbal semantic memory, obviously. So semantic memory is not just verbal, but it can be semantic knowledge. You know what this is when you look at it. You don't have to label it as a bottle. You kind of have a visual understanding of it. So animals know semantic things in their lives non-verbally. So that certainly extends through mammals. I'd want to go down to reptiles and fish, but because I don't know enough about it. But certainly we see the ability to have semantic memory in mammals. The third kind of memory is procedural memory. And this is often talked about like habits and other things that are kind of hardwired automatic responses. But the weird thing is Endel Talving gave a kind of consciousness to procedural memory too. He called it anoetic consciousness. And I struggled with that for so long. Procedural memory is supposed to be unconscious. So how can you have an unconscious basis of a conscious, or how can you have a conscious experience of something that's unconscious?
Right.
So it just really troubled me. And a year or two before he died, I called him and we talked about it. And he said, well, he was really more interested in semantic and episodic memory. And he needed a name he needed a kind of consciousness for the third one, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. But then I found some other researchers who were talking about anoetic consciousness that was very relevant to the kind of work that I had done for many years on the amygdala and so-called fear conditioning and so forth. And the idea that they had was that the amygdala was the seat of fear. And many, many people think that. And many, many people think that I invented that, and it's not true. I didn't invent that. I always said the amygdala is an implicit or unconscious processor of danger and fear, not a conscious place where fear bubbles up out of. So what these people were talking about when they said that the amygdala is the home of conscious fear was they were talking about an anoetic state of fear. So what I came to conclude is that this whole procedural memory thing is a grab bag. It's just a category that's not episodic and semantic and therefore not conscious. So they put all kinds of stuff in there.
It's the third other thing.
Just piled anything that wasn't in the first two categories, put them down there. And what that means is that perhaps there are some of those things that are more unconscious than others, right? So what I'm getting at is William James talked about something called the fringe of consciousness. And by that, what he meant was states that sit right on the edge that are not quite conscious and not quite unconscious. So you mentioned walking into your home, I think earlier, or you are walking into here or something. But let's take the example: you walk into your home. You don't have to tell yourself, "This is my home."
Right.
Same thing with your body. You don't have to tell yourself, "This is my body." You don't have to tell yourself, "This is my mind." Normally, and so, but then when you walk into your apartment, if all of a sudden you see like the chairs are turned over and some books are pulled off the shelf, that bumps you from this anoetic state where everything is right, where you don't have to think about it, to a state of something is wrong. It goes from rightness to wrongness, binary. And once wrongness is kicked in, semantically, you evaluate that situation as it's a situation of danger. You label it that way, and then episodically or autonoetically, You bump that into, you start worrying. You're afraid because maybe the person is still in there, or maybe they're going to come back for you.
They took something.
What happened to my stuff? And so you quickly bump through the lowest fringe conscious level up to the most conscious level when you go from rightness to wrongness in the Jamesian sense. So the difference between my theory of what the amygdala does and what the theory of those other folks that say that fear is in the amygdala, mine is that fear is not in the amygdala. What is in the amygdala is a defensive survival circuit. It's a circuit that has been evolving since the beginning of life 4 billion years ago, that every organism from the first bacterial cell that ever lived had to be able to detect danger and respond to danger. And that's been true of every organism that has ever lived since then.
Right.
In animals with the nervous system, all animals with nervous system, whether a bug, an octopus, a snail, a fly, all have some circuit that detects danger and allows you to protect yourself automatically, reflexively, or innately, in danger. And of course, mammals have that too, and that's what the amygdala does. It detects and responds to danger. Fear is the cognitive interpretation that you are in harm's way. So the amygdala is sending signals to the body.
Right.
Those body signals are coming back to the brain and contributing to a schema that is developing. The fact that you look outside around you and you see that there's a predator or someone scary looking with a knife, that goes into the schema as well. So, highly aroused things with knives and so forth, it doesn't take much to pattern complete the schema into one of fear. Now, what is fear? Your fear is different from mine because we've each had different experiences with danger over the course of our lives. We've learned fear in different ways.
Some people are afraid of dogs. Most people aren't.
Right. Or even, but anything, it's like we all have a set of memories, semantic and conceptual memories about what fear is. And that's true of people all around the world. So because you can translate the word fear around the world, some say that fear is universal. But what's universal around the world is danger. Right? And it's danger that everyone has because each person not only has their own personal learning of schema, but they learn it within a certain culture. So different cultures are going to have different schema that your personal schema will be layered in. And so what you experience is danger, and when you respond to danger and how you respond to it and how you think you respond to it and whether you'd like to respond to it differently and all of that is bundled into these schema and becomes the template for the mental model that allows you to know you're in a fearful situation, that you're experiencing fear.
So the amygdala is processing threat. It's not necessarily processing fear. And that's the distinction that you're trying to make. Because obviously, I know from your work, people have sort of misinterpreted it to say, oh, the amygdala is the fear center of the brain. Right. That's what it does. But really, it's just telling your body, like, hey, there's a threat that we're detecting. And then it goes to your body, and then we'll go back and inform into your general consciousness of saying, oh, now we're afraid of something. But fear, if it's not happening in the amygdala, where is it happening?
That's happening in again, we talk about how there's different theories of consciousness. My theory of consciousness is that there are circuits in the prefrontal cortex that are constructing these schema, that are receiving the schema from the hippocampus and ventromedial prefrontal cortex. Not that you need to know what that is, but just other areas are memory areas are constructing the schema, sending it to the prefrontal cortex. The mental model is developing in the prefrontal cortex and working memory, and then that becomes the basis for the amodal narrative that goes out to speech and behavior and consciousness.
Interesting. And you're able to discern this because there's some places in the world where people are afraid of different things, or there might be something that's not actually threatening that people are afraid of. Is that reasonable?
Well, there's a lot of cross-cultural studies of emotion.
So I guess I wonder if there's something like I don't know, maybe like cockroaches or something, where there's some cultures where people are very afraid.
Right.
They don't really pose any real threat, But in America, we're very afraid of them, and maybe in other cultures, I grew up in Florida, and we see palmetto bugs everywhere, and if we see one, we just kind of shoo them off. We're less afraid of them. Whereas if you're living in the city, if people see a cockroach, they might freak out.
Well, it depends on the cultural narratives that are there. So if way back there was some maybe spiritual angle, or the cockroaches were some
Demons
evil
or something.
thing, and then that gets carried forward in folk psychology and becomes part of the culture, then people will kind of in the background have that kind of sense that they're dangerous or creepy or something.
Mm-hmm. But that threat is coming from the amygdala because of cultural reasons, not because it's actually grounded in actual.
No, we don't want to overdo the amygdala. That processing threat. The amygdala is what it's dedicated to in terms of threat is predatory threats. Mm-hmm. So it's hardwired by evolution to respond to natural predators of the species. So for cats, it'd be dogs, and for mice, it'd be cats, and so forth.
Interesting.
So
I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as like epigenetics. Like
there's probably a lot of that. The epigenetics is so complicated, and there's a lot of controversy because I think a lot of people don't understand it, and I'm one of those that doesn't.
Like, have you seen these videos of like people will put a cucumber behind their cat, and then the cat will turn around and they'll see the cucumber and they'll leap with fear and run away.
Yeah.
And people have kind of posited that it's because they see the cucumber and they associate it with a snake.
Yeah.
And then as a result, they think there's a snake behind them and they jump. All of these cats have never seen a snake before. They're house cats.
Yeah. There's a guy at UC Davis in California that used to study these animals in the Sierra Nevadas. And it was a certain kind of, I think it was some kind of squirrel or something, that had been living there for millions of years. Mm-hmm. And there was a fault line, and they never had found snake fossils above the fault line, only below. So no snakes up there, but there were some of these squirrels up there and some down below. And so when the ones down below would be put in the presence of a snake, they would
freak out,
kick and spit and do it, a kind of an innate ritual they would go through. But they grabbed some from up on top and put them with the snake, and they did the same thing. So it'd been 5 million years, not enough to get rid of that.
Interesting. So even though there was millions of years of distance, it was still ingrained in the biology of the animal. Yep. How interesting.
Yes.
Who
knows what that means, but it's a good story.
Are there any things that you think we possess as humans that are like sort of remnants of something or threats?
We possess what?
Like remnants of fear or remnants of anxiety that exist within our brains that might be ancestral?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, the human brain's so complicated, and our experiences are so, varied, and you don't know what happens in early family life. That's a secret that nobody knows what's going on, really. So if a parent is doing something bad to a young child, the child can't remember, but its brain likely can form certain kinds of memories. For example, the amygdala is mature a little bit faster than the hippocampus. So, I mean, I used to talk about this in the 1990s in my book, The Emotional Brain, that, you could have a person who's exposed to some kind of trauma very early in life, like at 6 months old, say hospital trauma or something that happens bad. I don't mean like sex and stuff, but, just any kind of
abandonment
kind of thing where you feel helpless, even as a young infant, that the amygdala memories would be there, even though the hippocampus, which is where we have our conscious, memories formed, was not online. So the idea is that, throughout life, there could be stimuli that have been kind of Pavlovian conditioned through that emergency situation, like bright lights in an emergency room or sharp objects or something that could be triggers throughout life.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very strange that our brains, even from a very early age, can possess those and like still remember those things, that the amygdala would still hold on to it.
Well, every cell in your body is a memory cell in a sense. I mean, in your brain, because what do cells do? Neurons do. They send axons to other neurons, and those axons fire action potentials and activate the next cell. Now, that's how memories are formed, through this kind of synaptic interaction between cells. So if you got some rapid firing of action potentials, the cell is going to learn. Learning is the way we talk about it is an abstraction of what's going on in a group of cells to account for some memory that is very gross in the world. But your whole brain is a learning machine.
On a molecular level, each different cell is still possessing those memories, or maybe
it's not. There's no real memory content. It's
right.
It's synaptic and physiological.
Right. They're, I guess, controlling small pieces of our ability to recall memories, and then clusters of cells, I guess, are now more responsible for creating the whole picture.
Yeah.
And then anything that we can't recall, we'll just make it up.
Yeah.
Now, what is in your opinion at least, the most practical application of your understanding of consciousness and the way that you see sort of the states of being? I know obviously your new book is the 4 states of being. What is the way that people can apply that information to their lives in order to better themselves?
I think I'd like to talk about the practical implications of the amygdala first, since we're on that topic. And the reason that I go on these tirades about the amygdala is not a fear center is not because of, ivory tower academic arguments. I mean, there's some of that, but it's not just because I'm competing with somebody about what the amygdala does. The point is that if you take a rat or a mouse, put them in a pharmaceutical lab, and the researchers test drugs on the animal and find that the animal is, let's say, freezes less in the presence of that drug. That is interpreted as that the amygdala was less reactive, and therefore the mouse or rat was less fearful, and therefore when you give that drug to a person, they'll be less fearful.
Right. That would make sense.
But it doesn't work.
And why is that?
Because the amygdala is not the source of fear. You can turn off the amygdala, but that's not going to make a person have relief from mental anguish. The amygdala is involved in detecting and responding to danger. It's a control system for behavior and physiology.
Mm-hmm.
Fear is the psychological interpretation, the narrative that you are in harm's way. The narratives that you carry to psychotherapy have to be changed through psychotherapy. There's no way you can take a pill, swallow it, it's going to go into your stomach, into your down through your digestive system, into your bloodstream. It's going to go to every possible place in your body because the bloodstream is just going to pass it around, including your brain. It's going to find the magic spot in the brain that's responsible for fear, and all of a sudden you're cured. That's not going to happen. Fear is not, you can't change the content of a mental state, which is what fear is, with a drug that makes an animal freeze less. It doesn't make sense.
And so which drugs would people use to...
I don't think we should use drugs. Not for changing mental anguish. You can use drugs. Okay, let's say, do you like heavy metal music? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I won't say this then.
No. Go ahead.
Right,
it's not my favorite genre.
I don't like heavy metal music. No offense, but so let's say I go to a restaurant here in Williamsburg tonight, and they're playing it loud, and I'm with my wife.
I don't want it in a restaurant. I'm with you there.
Okay, but let's say there's loud music in a restaurant, and it's annoying because you can't hear what your party's saying. Mm-hmm. You ask the waiter to turn it down. Okay, and they turn it down, and it's lower, but it's just still the same old lousy song you didn't like, but it's not. It's less aversive, less annoying, and I think a lot of the medications that are developed in animals do that. They turn down the volume of the brain on those things. Mm-hmm. Your heart beats a little less fast. your palms are sweating less, you're less likely to be tense and freezing, but you're still anxious. Why? Because anxiety is a state of mind, and we have to fix that. To relieve the mental anguish. Why do people go to therapy? They want to feel better.
Right.
And if you give them drugs that don't make them feel better, they're going to complain that it's a failure. And so many people are unhappy with medical therapy, you know.
And they're seeking symptomatic relief, I guess.
Yeah.
They say, "Oh, I get anxious when I go to work, and I need to go to work. So give me something that's going to make me not feel anxious when I go to work."
Right.
And so they'll be prescribed something like Xanax, I guess, or Zoloft or some type of antidepressant or something, and that will basically affect the physiological sensation that they're feeling about their anxiety. But it's not actually affecting the anxiety itself.
Let me backtrack a little bit because, if what I'm saying is applying probably more to SSRIs than to benzos. Now with benzos, there's an interesting situation. So, yes, you can feel lighter, not as tormented by all that, because it is doing all the GABA receptors, these are inhibitory receptors in the brain for inhibitory neurons, and so when you inhibit the brain, everything kind of tones down. And so a lot of psychiatrists say that you're getting a general emotional blunting. It's not specifically anxiety that's targeted, but you do get a kind of blunting. The problem is if we want to develop something that's better and really help people, we can't just take the general, because we need to be able to say how we're going to change anxiety, not everything at the same time. Because a lot of the drugs are, it's a long story, but basically I think that the part of the problem is that the medical field of psychiatry has been sold a bill of goods about the amygdala being the answer to all of these problems. And it's happened because, my scientific colleagues, and also, I was doing this for a long time too, talking that way. But then I realized that we're never going to help people if we're trying to do it through studies of animals. We're not going to help them with the mental anguish. We can help them with the behavioral and physiological symptoms, which is fine. But ultimately, you have to change the mental anguish in the person. You've got to be able to help them with that. And that can't happen, I don't think, with the medication.
Can you talk me through just like a hypothetical of this type of situation? Like there's someone that might be anxious or it might be depressed, and so they get prescribed an SSRI. And what is that doing to them physiologically? And what is it doing to them psychologically? And why is there a disconnect?
So I think I think it goes back to the volume issue. In anxiety, it's turning down the volume. In depression, the volume is kind of down anyway. So I don't know a lot about depression, so I won't say anything about that. But in anxiety, I think you're just kind of messing with the volume of the radio. Which is good. You have to do that.
What's up, guys? We're going to take a break really quick because we got to talk about your amazing dick game. Yes, you right now, listen to my voice, my deep, soothing voice. You have an amazing dick game. Or maybe you know someone with an amazing dick game. Maybe you got a boyfriend. Who knows? But if you have an amazing dick game, there's a way that you can make it better. And that's with the good people over at Bluechew. Bluechew is an amazing service that basically delivers a chewable tablet that has the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, all that stuff, but this is the chew. It's at a fraction of the cost, and it's never been easier to get your hands on the greatest dick game of your life. Never been easier. I'm telling you. You can go to bluechew.com and you can submit all your information to a licensed person, a legit person that will then mail you a discreet, very unassuming, but very, very powerful package. You know what I'm talking about? The powerful package to your home. That's how easy it is. You don't got to go talk to a doctor and be like, yeah, I want, nope, easy. You got to just go on the internet, bluechew.com. I want to get the best dick given of my life. And that's how you do it. Easy as that. And for the listeners of this show, of this program, you are going to get free first month of Bluechew. you're going to be getting Bluechew for free. All you got to do is pay $5 shipping. That's a cup of coffee, black, to be delivering that BBC. You know what I'm saying? That's bluechew.com, BLUECHEW.com. Use the promo code GAGNON, GAGNON, and receive your first month for free. That's bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And thank you so much, Bluechew. I'm telling you, man, check out this product. Even if you're one of these people that's like, I don't know, I don't really need it. What are you talking about? It could be better. It can always be better. Let's say you're in the 1%, you're about to be in the 0.01% with Bluechew. Now let's get back to the show.
So if someone's on anxiety medication and they feel better, are you suggesting that there's still an underlying anxiety, like anxious rumination that exists?
No, because placebo is a terrific, a great aid, if you can get the placebo effect.
Interesting.
I'm not a doctor. So I can't really I shouldn't be talking about specifics. And I'm just talking about all this from the point of view of my 50 years as a neuroscientist. And, I really think that we have a problem in science where we get stuck on dogma. Things will arise and they are so clear and true at the beginning that it gets carried forward and never questions. I think that's what's happened with the whole fear thing, that the amygdala was able to disrupt some behavioral tasks in animals, and therefore it became the best shot at, it was making rats freeze less or avoid less. So, okay, maybe that's all we need to fix people, because how did modern psychiatry come to be what it is? Well, you had Freud as the dominant force in, all the way through either Freud or the Freudians that followed him through mid-century. And by that time, psychiatry was trying to become more scientific. And what that meant to them at the time was put Freud in the rearview mirror, right? Because there was a lot of questions about Freud and whether it was, what was good and what was bad, but they threw the whole thing out, the baby with the bathwater. So what they didn't like about Freud was subjectivity, the personal feelings of the patient. And that was easy to get rid of because the behaviorist had dominated psychology for decades, where you couldn't talk about consciousness. It was all about behavior. So it was a kind of perfect storm where psychiatry wanted to get rid of Freud. Behaviorism was saying that we can solve everything through behavior. We don't need a mind. And so psychiatry used behaviorists to test drugs in animals to help cure people. And we still haven't recovered from how psychiatry has marginalized subjectivity ever since. That every therapist wants their patient to feel better, but there are no metrics for feeling, in a sense. The insurance companies want objective markers. Is the person getting better?
Right.
Check these three things. And even cognitive behavioral therapy, which started out as having a lot of cognition in it, gradually became more and more behavioristic and checking off boxes and stuff. And every psychiatrist or every therapist wants their patient to feel better. And they all talk about the things I'm talking about, that you have to deal with the symptoms, but you also have to deal with the subjectivity. But they don't do it. I think there's got to be a systematic approach. Step one, tame the amygdala. Cut out the behavior and physiology. How would you do that? Well, maybe drugs would do that. You might also try EMDR.
What's that?
That's eye movement desensitization therapy. It was viewed as a kind of kooky thing for a while, but now it's pretty well accepted that if you have the patient move their eyes back and forth, or the therapist is touching them simultaneously back and forth on one side of the body or the other, it kind of is distracting to the mind. And so it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like meditation, where you're removing distractions from the mind. So if you could be doing, for example, cognitive behavioral extinction for a spider phobia, while doing EMDR, and the spider phobics don't like spiders, and they don't want to do this kind of exposure to spiders because they don't like them. It's really too terrifying to them. But if you could distract the patient with EMDR or meditation or something else, then you might be able to allow the patient enough exposure subliminally, in a sense. You know, the patient's conscious mind is here, but the peripheral vision is also seeing it, and that's going to the amygdala.
Interesting. Have you ever seen these? I forget what they're called. I had a friend that had one. They're basically these mats that have like small little like dull plastic spikes on them, and you lay down on the mat, and it's about like, I don't know, this big. It's about like the size of your back, and it's similar kind of like to that tap therapy or to that eye movement therapy where you would lay down and you would feel a sensation. It's unpleasant-ish, but it's not painful, really. It just kind of is enough to sort of make your mind focus on these little pricks in your back. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it's able to actually reduce anxiety because your brain is allocating more focus to this thing than to whatever's going on in your life or your future.
You know, anything that kind of distracts you from those anxious thoughts, because, you know, anxious thoughts not only are anxious thoughts, but they also are top-down drivers of body physiology and other things. So
that's why I think working out is so great for people, because it genuinely decreases the amount of energy that you have to anxiously ruminate.
Right.
You're able to expend energy in a way. And obviously body image and things like that and movement makes you feel good, but genuinely taking out the energy that you have to think about, oh, how am I doing? What is going on in my future? What does my friend think of me? All of these little anxious thoughts. It's able to kind of cull those. Which I think is really, really beneficial. Have you ever heard of anyone doing research into like fitness or anything like that as a cure for anxiety?
A colleague of mine at NYU, Wendy Suzuki, has been doing a lot of brain and body health stuff.
Yeah. I think for me at least, that's been something that's been really beneficial. Yeah. What else would you recommend if there's people that are feeling like anxiety or things like that would potentially help?
Well, let me finish the 3 steps. So the first step was taming the amygdala. But one way you could do that is through these EMDR possibly, or other kinds of distraction methods. But another is by subliminal presentation. So you can flash a stimulus on a screen very, very quickly, and consciously you won't notice it. It's too flash to reach the threshold of consciousness, too fast. But if, let's say, it's a picture of a spider, that will reach the amygdala through the subliminal presentation. And we know that because studies have shown that the amygdala is activated by these subliminal pictures of spiders.
Even if the observer is not even conscious of the image. Wow.
Consciously, you don't know it's there, but you can keep presenting it over and over and possibly extinguishing the amygdala and its physiological reactions. So that would be a way of allowing the spider phobic to have some relief on the kind of behavior and physiology side without having to actually consciously be exposed to it. So step 2 would then be to begin changing your memories about who you are.
And that really works, flashing something that quickly, even if you're not conscious of your observation of it.
It goes to your brain. It activates your amygdala, and your heart begins to beat fast.
I mean, that just seems wild. So in this, podcast right now, if I put on the screen a picture of a spider really quickly, so fast that no one saw it, they technically would feel potential like induced anxiety or fear.
I don't know, but there's a lot of distance between. You're talking about a few milliseconds. So I don't know what happens to those milliseconds over the transmission speed over the internet and everything. Probably okay.
I wonder if people do that in like movies or news or something.
There was in one of the Bush, I think it was the Bush-Gore election. I could be wrong about which one, whether it was that or not. But there was a Republican campaign where they flashed on the screen Democrats was like in full print, and then they pulled out rats and only flashed it microscopically. So Democrats, rats, so that the rats was going into the brain.
Oh wow, that's so
I
funny.
mean, I don't know. I have no idea how effective that was, but
I mean, might trigger something in your brain if your brain is able to comprehend things that are happening so fast that your
yeah, but
eyes
the amygdala is
can't.
not. It's more going to be about the body and physiology rather than the content, I think.
But let's say you're making a scary movie and you're like, hey, we can scare people with the content of the movie, but we can also add some type of subliminal flash.
I'm sure that's all in there.
Wow.
Certainly, that all it takes to really get a good scene going is like a thump, a noise, or something, anything sudden, right?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. But I wonder, but even like a noise you would be conscious of. You would see it and go, oh, they made a noise. That's why I got startled.
I'm sure there's some.
I wonder if it works with other things, like arousal. Like if you were to show like a picture of a beautiful woman and flash it, where you're so fast your eye doesn't comprehend it. I wonder if your brain.
I have lots of studies of that.
And the same has been found. Your brain's able to comprehend it.
Well, I think there are studies that are measuring, or in sexual organs doing that kind of thing. I don't know if they're still doing that. There was a professor I knew in graduate school that had a whole program on. I don't want to get it's too controversial.
Wait, really?
It's about it was studying sexual arousal in students. Which was all okay back then,
Were you a part of the study?
No.
Are you sure?
No, he was just.
You weren't a subject?
He was in the department. I just knew about it. It was like we all were curious about it because it was. But I hadn't.
It's pretty titillating.
I think they were. I was a graduate student. I think these were all undergraduates that were being studied.
That's wild.
But I don't know. I only know this through rumor. I don't know that.
Fair. Good answer. That's wild. Okay, so back to.
So you tame the hippocampus by altering one's memories of themselves and the facts and things of the situation. And then, so once you've done that, you've prepared the brain in a way that it's ready for psychotherapy, where you can just go talk without all the noise bombarding you. And I think, psychotherapists probably do all of that. They want to reduce arousal, they want to change memories, and they want to have conversations. But maybe you've got to do it in a sequence. Because if it's all done at once, you're taxing the brain too much. It doesn't like to be doing too many things at one time.
So it needs to be sequential.
I think so. Get rid of the amygdala or tame it down, change some memories, and then talk.
Are there programs for this that try to use this approach?
I've been talking about it for years. As far as I know, nobody's ever done it.
Interesting. I mean, I feel like it'd be worth trying for anxiety.
Yeah.
Because I'll feel anxious sometimes, right? Like something will happen and I'll just kind of get this rumination where I'm like, oh man, I'm worried about that thing in the future. And if I'm able to use this sort of 3-step process, is there a way that you think people can practically do it every day? Like if I'm feeling anxious about, a show that I have coming up or something that's going on in my life,
Right.
Is there anything I can do based off that model that I can apply to myself?
Well, I don't know how you tame the amygdala yourself, except by meditation, and if you can do that.
Okay, so let's say I'm meditating regularly. That's going to kind of tame my amygdala.
Yeah, meditate before your show to calm down the arousal.
Mm-hmm.
Then, think about, maybe while you're meditating, try to come up with memories of things that, you feel you could change and would like to change and would feel better if you changed. Not necessarily memories, but aspects of you that you remember. But the next part, you need a therapist
to talk through it. I wonder if there's
But I think the first two would be a good start.
Yeah, I almost wonder if there's a component of like you hear people talk about manifesting all the time, where they think, oh, think of, visualize yourself doing something that you wish that would happen, or visualize yourself scoring a goal in a soccer game, whatever the thing is that's happening. I wonder if what's happening in your brain when you're doing that, and obviously those things will make you feel good, right? Yeah. You're envisioning a future scenario. But I wonder if those things are almost creating a false memory for you. Where what is the difference between envisioning a future thing and creating a false memory? There's almost nothing, right?
Not, it's really...
It's just you visualizing yourself doing something that has never happened.
I mean, false memory is bad when somebody implants it in you.
Of course.
There was all that controversy in, when was it, the 90s, of therapists inserting like satanic rituals into the patient's minds. And
But what if you could insert your own false memory of something positive?
Right.
And that you could meditate and then try to create a fake memory for yourself of something positive that you've done in the past.
I mean, one of the things we were doing in our research for a while was called reconsolidation, which is memories are stored through a process called consolidation, where proteins are synthesized and kind of glue the memory together. And a guy in my lab, very brilliant, from Montreal, actually from Toronto. He was originally he's from Montreal. Came up with some studies where he rediscovered something that had been swept under the rug in the 1960s called reconsolidation. And in this, the idea is that, let's go back to consolidation. In order to consolidate a memory, you have to have protein synthesis during the post-memory time, the post-learning time. So if you block protein synthesis after learning, then the animals don't remember.
If you block the protein synthesis, then they won't remember.
Right, because the protein synthesis is necessary to store the memory. But this other body of research said that if you block protein synthesis after remembering, then you lose the memory because you have to restore it each time you take it out.
Wow. I mean, that sounds like a Men in Black, flash gun. That
and
can
boy, we got
things.
So many, like we were on NPR, Radio Lab, it's all over the place. It works in animals. It's much harder to get in humans.
And so what would be an example of how it would work in animals?
So, you give a rat a tone shock pairing.
Mm-hmm. They hear a noise, they get shocked, they freeze.
Okay. If you, right after they are conditioned, you give them a protein synthesis inhibitor, then they don't freeze later.
And then you play the tone, they should freeze up because they're about to get shocked, and they don't.
So they don't remember the tone shock association.
Wow.
So for the reconsolidation, you condition them, play the tone, they freeze, and then the next day you play the tone again, block protein synthesis, and then the next day you test them, and the memory's gone.
And what is the administration of the protein synthesis inhibitor? Like, what is that?
So the traditional way would be you would inject it intraperitoneally and, like around your navel, basically. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's good absorption there and it goes throughout the body. This would be in a rat. Mm-hmm. What we were doing was we knew where the memory was being formed and stored in the amygdala. So we were putting the protein synthesis inhibitor directly in the amygdala. You
knew where the memory was being stored?
Yeah, the amygdala that was the whole amygdala story.
I see. Just in the amygdala generally.
Yeah, the amygdala was where, if you damage that area of the brain, rats could no longer be conditioned. And humans as well, if they have brain damage in the amygdala. And so if we injected the protein synthesis inhibitor in the amygdala after learning, then they wouldn't show the memory later. And if we injected it after remembering, again, they wouldn't have it later.
Interesting. Are you able to control what thing they don't remember, quote unquote? Or is it just disrupting the amygdala in general and making them, like if you showed that same rat to a snake, would the rat be afraid of the snake?
No, this is a stimulus specific. So whatever stimulus is remembered, that is the stimulus that's lost. So it's very specific to the stimulus.
Interesting. So it's not just making them forget everything they're afraid of.
It's one
specific stimulus. Interesting. So hypothetically, let's say and again, I know we're having a difficult time doing this with humans, but if there was a girl that was bit by a dog when she was young and she has a lifelong fear of dogs, hypothetically it'd be possible to inject a protein synthesis inhibitor into her amygdala when she was with a dog and then testing her the next day.
Hypothetically, because you can't do that in the human brain, and you wouldn't use protein synthesis inhibitors.
Why?
Too toxic. In the amygdala, you put such a small amount in, it's not toxic. But in all the early studies, They had to put in a lot, and the animals were always sick, so you didn't know if they were like unmotivated or they really. But with the amygdala studies, we were able to show it.
Interesting. So what would you use for humans that could make it do that?
So we were able, in rats, we were able to show the propranolol in the amygdala did the trick. So we and others have tried that, and there's some partial success in humans, but it's not perfect. Here's the problem, that in the rat studies, we're talking about a single little tiny pure tone, one little kind of sound that we are able to, quote, erase.
It's very controlled. It's very controlled.
Yeah, it's very controlled. But a human memory in a traumatic situation is very complex.
Right.
And the assumption that you could go from the rat single stimulus to the human very complex memory was misguided. I mean, we were excited about it, but it just never. That's why it didn't work out.
Has anyone picked up on that research?
It's still going on.
Oh, wow.
It's been since 2000 this started, so 24 years.
Do you know what the current status is?
They're still trying to get it to work. Yeah.
I mean, there's some pretty big implications of that. That really is like a Men in Black, flash device to make you forget something.
I mean, your example was perfect because the problem with trauma is if you need to treat it with if you had a drug that you wanted to treat that with, you'd have to do it right after the experience in the emergency room, right? Immediately, because you only have a few hours for consolidation to be blocked. But theoretically, with reconsolidation, you can have age-old memories and block them by retrieving the memory.
Wow.
And we got hit up by the George Bush's bioethics panel because they said, memory is sacrosanct. You can't mess with memory. But every therapy session is messing with memory and learning.
Really? They didn't want you to mess with memory, quote unquote. I
assume, they wanted to say that for themselves.
Yeah, I guess. But I assume this is something that like the military could use.
Yeah. Well, that all of that came up. Like maybe the drug cartels are going to use it in some way. I forget exactly how it was going to be, but everybody is talking about all the possible ways it could really cause trouble.
Oh, that's wild. I had no idea that you invented the device to make people forget memories.
Well, if anybody invented it, it was Kareem, but we all we did is we turned it into something we could study in the brain.
Wow. I mean, that's so interesting. I could see like a military application of that. Imagine you get someone that knows information, they're a hostage, you torture them, they give you the information, and then make them forget they ever got tortured. Yeah. And then you send them home and they go, what happened? You go, man, nothing. I went there, I sat there for 2 days and I went home. And then the other people don't, I mean, that's wild. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of benefit for that. Also nefarious things that could be done with that as well. We're going to take a break real quick because you have back hair. Yeah. And if you're like any other dude in the world with back hair, you probably have your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend. You probably have to ask them, hey, could you get this spot on my back? I know this is embarrassing. I know this is awkward. Maybe you're a Greek guy. Who knows what your problem is? But I have your solution. It's called Bakscape. Bakscape is this fancy little gizmo right here. Look at this. It is an all-in-one handle with the smoothest shave you've probably ever seen in your life. You just take this right back here, and you can hit every hard-to-reach spot on your entire body. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, Mark, this seems like overkill, right? This seems crazy, right? A whole apparatus just to shave your back. This is going to be so inconvenient. Here's where it gets wild. You watching this? The top of the shaver pops out. Easy. Now you have a tiny little handheld shaver that can get every other part of your body. Let's say you got chest hair. Maybe you got leg hair. Maybe you got a some bushes. That's where this comes in, baby. As easy as that, it can slide in and out of the 2.0 friction fit handle. Just that easy. This folds up, one button, and this is going underneath your sink. Out of sight, out of mind. No one even has to know. Bakscape is so confident that you're going to love this product that if you don't love it, they will give you your money back. That's how confident they are. They are willing to put their money on the line. And for the listeners of this show, we're going to offer you 10% off with the promo code CAMP on your first order on any of the kits on their website. That's right. You go to Bakscape, BAKSCAPE.com, and use the promo code CAMP, C-A-M-P. You will get 10% off your first order on any of the kits on their website. I'm telling you guys,
This is the way we're shaving from now on. This is how we're shaving our backs, our butts, our faces probably. You can probably shave your head with this. I don't even know. I never will. But if you're looking for the shaver of the future, it's at Bakscape.com. Now let's get back to the show.
So The Four Realms of Existence is my new book. It came out in October 23. And the stuff we were talking about at the beginning was really kind of along those lines, because it talks about 4 ways that human beings exist. One is biological. Now, every organism that has ever lived, from the first bacterial cell to today, of all the animals and plants and fungi on Earth, is biological. But some biological organisms also have nervous systems, and they can also exist neurobiologically. That allows new efficiencies in digestion and prey and predator interactions and all kinds of things like that. The biological realm is involved in all those things we talked about in terms of reflexes, instincts, habits, and so forth that require no cognition, just automatic responses. The next level is the cognitive level, and that does involve cognition, of course, and is where we form these internal representations of the world based on schema. We have these mental maps based on schema, and we use those in thinking, planning, deciding, acting, and so forth, and being conscious. And finally, there's the conscious level. So those are the 4 realms. Now, I'm going to just tell you a quick little story about...
Well, I'm sorry. Could you just say the 4 again? It's biological?
So biological, neurobiological,
Yep.
cognitive,
And conscious. Got it.
The cognitive, there's a very interesting theory about cognition, which is that it starts with the fact that if you look at experiments on birds, especially corvids, like shrub jays, they have capacities that rival some of those in monkeys and even apes.
Oh, really?
They are incredibly intelligent. Now, not all birds can do that, only some.
Like crows and ravens, I've heard, are very intelligent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, all in that category there. So what is it that connects those birds and mammals? Because mammals obviously have that. All the mammals have that too. Warm-bloodedness. Now, not all birds are cognitive, but they're all warm-blooded. So there's something about being warm-blooded and the environment in which a particular group grows up that allows cognition to kick in. So what is it? Okay, so warm-blooded evolved in parallel with decision-making, thinking, planning, and so forth. Because to maintain a warm-blooded body, you've got to burn a lot of energy to get the fuel to maintain the warm-blooded body. So even the act of fueling is using energy.
Interesting. By virtue of being warm-bloodedness, you now are in a decision matrix where you have to make the proper decisions to maintain your warm-bloodedness.
Right.
And that requires you to be making optimal choices. That's interesting.
So, so the idea is that if you're warm-blooded, you need to, before you go out willy-nilly looking for food, if you have a mental map of the environment and you know that over here, at this time of year, it's a good time to find water and a good time to find certain fruits. Whereas if you go to a different place, might be, you might find something there in the summer, but not in the winter. And so the idea is that you need to know, first of all, what you need right now, where you're going to get it, is it going to be there? If not, where else can you go? And can you do all that in one round and get back to your people, your buddies, your animals, your other birds, in the amount of time where you're not stuck out overnight with predators attacking you?
So you have to make a choice.
Yeah, so it's all about choices. And it seems that birds, these certain birds and mammals have that. But if you go to other reptiles, birds are kind of reptiles. If you go to reptiles in general, they can't do it.
Right.
Fish can't do it.
Alligators, things like that.
No.
Yeah.
And the way
Because there's
this-
no cost. There's no cost to their biological features. Being cold-blooded, if they're not able to, the winter's going to come around and they can just stay in the water and put their nose out and be fine.
Right.
Interesting.
So the way this evolved was the first thing that happened was, speaking of alligators, their limbs are on the side, hanging off the side, whereas in warm-blooded animals, the limbs are under the body cavity, right? They're underneath. And that allowed you to run and breathe at the same time. So that allowed you to be more effective as a predator and more effective as a prey, and more efficient in all of your locomotor activities. And all of those things required the more energy, so you had to keep becoming more sophisticated cognitively to solve all that.
Interesting. So dogs obviously is like, their front and hind legs are directly underneath their body cavity, whereas alligators,
all mammals,
alligators would be outside.
mammals and birds again.
Interesting. And that's to create efficiency in their ability to move and breathe in order to maximize and be most efficient with their decision making.
Yeah.
Interesting. And so then pigeons, for example, they don't seem particularly bright to me. They seem kind of stupid.
I don't think they're in that category the ones that have been tested are mainly these jays and rays and crows and so forth.
But I'm so curious why those animals specifically, or why those birds specifically.
It
are so much
probably
more
has to do
intelligent.
something about, let's say in mammals, this new thing happened very early in their trajectory, right? So all mammals would then have inherited that capacity. But if in birds, it didn't happen until, the crows came along because of some environmental condition. It's not, the point is that it's parallel evolution. It didn't happen. It happened, something similar happened for different reasons in different animals.
Simultaneously. And so that part of the ancestral tree, for whatever reason, possessed those intelligent traits.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All mammals have their appendages underneath their body cavity?
Yeah.
Wow. That's
I mean,
whales, I guess, kind of.
well, whales, I don't know. That's a good question. They
That's
don't have legs, so.
Yeah. But like their little like fins, I guess, are like proto hands.
But
I guess.
I'm assuming they have some kind of, adjustment internally for the respiration to be able to work while they're paddling and stuff.
Interesting. Wow. That's
Or maybe it's mad. Maybe that's why they like spitting the.
Yeah.
But they are pretty smart.
Yeah.
So maybe the whole theory is wrong. This is not my theory.
Yeah,
It's
no. That's really interesting. No, that's really
I
interesting.
love that idea.
Yeah, that warm-bloodedness is the feature that would give them some type of biological mental advantage. That's so interesting. And because I guess the cold-bloodedness, so tell me then, I'm not sure if you would know this specifically, but like for snakes or something, if they're not able to, like why are they less bound by the decision matrix? Because they can go longer periods of, I guess, like abstinence from food or hibernation or things like that without the cost.
What do you mean?
Like for like cold-blooded reptiles or something like that. Why are they able to make worse decisions, or why are they not so bound by that decision matrix as warm-blooded animals?
Well, I think they live locally, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not going long distances.
So they don't have as much energy expenditure to go longer distances.
And, that they get their heat from being in the sun.
Oh, interesting.
And then they hibernate in the winter.
So yeah, I guess their bodies might be more efficient in that way, that they're able to sort of possess external.
I mean, there are some animals, I think some reptiles and some insects and stuff that have kind of a temporary warm-bloodedness. It's like situational.
Right.
That they can, like maybe bees have something that heats them up while they're flying. But it's not intrinsic to their nature. It's like warm-blooded animals have it 24/7.
Interesting. So now the four states of being, like you had said, biological, neurobiological, cognitive, conscious.
Right.
Which one do you find is the most interesting to you to think about, and which element of that?
Consciousness, of course.
that element of the research is the one that sticks out to you the most.
Yeah.
Do you see them as tiered?
They're not stacked on the top of each other so much as they are tiered, but they are tiered in a kind of symbiotic way. Like the neurobiological evolved out of the biological, but it also enhances the biological. So it's a loop. The cognitive evolved out of the neurobiological, but it also helps the neurobiological. The conscious, so forth.
And so all animals possess behavioral or biological, sorry.
Yes. All organisms possess
All organisms possess biological.
Every living thing that has ever lived is a biological organism. That's most of life.
I see.
So only animals have nervous systems. So only they can go up.
And then so on. And then humans, would you say, are the only ones that possess all four?
No, I think I used to be kind of down on animal consciousness. I'm not. What I say about animal consciousness is that I don't deny it, but we have to be, judicious about it, because we can't be willy-nilly about just saying it looks like it's conscious. This goes back to our very beginning of our discussion, where, you think if a rat's freezing, it must be afraid, but freezing is a neurobiological realm activity that has no cognition and no consciousness.
Right.
So we can't use that, and that's part of the whole problem in talking about the amygdala as a fear center. Just because the amygdala controls freezing doesn't mean it makes fear. Fear is a cognitive, conscious realm stuff.
And then as far as this research specifically in this book that you've written, what do you feel like are the most, I guess, broadly reaching applications or implications from the research? If, I were to read the book, or, someone else were to read the book, is there something that I can take away to my regular life and think like, oh, wow, here's how these states affect me?
There's a lot of, in the conscious part, I think it's the best part. I go into a lot of new concepts about consciousness, this dual mental model thing, and how we can, what we say and what we do are not necessarily the same, and this anoetic narrative. And at the very end, I pose my argument is that AI will never be conscious, because consciousness requires a 4 billion year evolutionary history of biological accidents that led to the first organisms that could be conscious, which may be mammals, but I don't know.
Wow. So as a neuroscientist, you don't believe that AI will ever be conscious?
No.
Because there's not enough time.
It'll always be programmed to look conscious, but not to be conscious. Because consciousness is so ingrained in all of our four realms. It depends. Your conscious mind dies if your biological realm dies, right? So we need metabolism from the biological realm to fuel all of the parts of all four realms, including the biological realm. It's got to fuel off of metabolism. But also the neurobiological is dependent upon the biological, but it enables the cognitive. The cognitive enables the conscious. So they're all entwined, and that entwinement is a history. The starting of the entwinement goes back, I would say, 800 million years ago to the first animals. So they went from being single-cell organisms that had a visceral internal life and a somatic external life. In other words, they had to get stuff from the outside world, but they had to have metabolism on the inside to maintain that and manage it. But then with the nervous system coming along in the first animals about 800 million years ago, the nervous system made the visceral metabolic activities more efficient, and it made the external activities supplying the fuel more efficient. And then when cognitive comes along, it makes the neurobiological more efficient. Same story all the way up and down. So what I'm saying is that ultimately you get to the conscious realm, which has evolved through all those steps. It's slowly been, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's the body wasn't being prepared for it, but it was creating the possibility of having it. And it depends on all of those other realms.
I mean, I guess I'm curious as to why time and body are so fundamental to consciousness, right? Like, I wonder if there's a way that you could speed up conscious progression through the use of computers. And also to say that computers also have a physical presence.
Right.
They like these, like neural networks exist on a physical computer that is the body, so to speak.
Right.
So why can't that be the body for, the computers as we have our own body?
So, I mean, just take a neural network that, there's lots of efforts to rewire the brain in neural networks. But, that's like saying that a neuron is a single thing. I mean, every neuron is incredibly complicated in terms of its molecular structure, all of its entwined, and, every one of you would have to create every feature of every one of those neurons, and they're going to be different for every neuron to some extent, in order to get to the kind of biological state or artificial state that would possibly at least get to the threshold of consciousness.
But I guess in my mind, I just think, sure, we had millions and millions of years plus, an evolving Homo sapien body to create human consciousness. But I guess I wonder, one, why do that's how we created human consciousness. Why can AI not create its own consciousness or a different type of consciousness? And it would still be able to have speech, it would still be able to have awareness, it would still be able to have, some type of behavioral pattern. It could create the same exact mental model that our consciousness behaves under. I don't know why it's necessary condition for it to be time and body.
So the thought I was looking for is that if you take, remember I was telling you about Tulving's noetic and autonoetic consciousness. The beauty of those two states of episodic and semantic memory is that you can study those in animals, and you never know in an animal whether they cross the finish line. In other words, in humans, we know that when we have an episodic memory, we've crossed the consciousness finish line because we experience it.
Mm-hmm.
But you can have episodic memory that may only take you to the finishing line. It's the necessary step, and it does a lot for you even if you're not conscious. And semantic memory takes you to the border of noetic consciousness. But animals have those, but we never will know if they are crossing the finish line and actually conscious. And you will never know in AI whether they can do that too. Well, my wife is calling me.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. I'll call her back in a minute.
Okay.
So
interesting. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So now the amygdaloids.
Yeah. So the Amygdaloids are we were a science band back in 2006 when we started, and it was just kind of an accidental thing. I was playing guitar with a professor at NYU, and we were playing around at parties and stuff, and we had to kind of focus on kind of 60 songs that were about mind and brain, like Mother's Little Helper and Manic Depression, 19th Nervous Breakdown. And I said, I can write some songs like that. And so I started writing songs, and we got invited to give a lecture. I got invited to give a lecture at Union Hall in Park Slope for a secret science club. And they said, we'll have entertainment after. I said, I'll bring the entertainment. So a new postdoc had arrived. She was a drummer, and she had a research assistant who was a bass player. So we had a whole band. We went and played. I did the lecture, then we played the songs, and the audience really loved the new song, the original songs about mind and brain. One was called "The Mind-Body Problem," and the other was called "When the Night is Dark." And we kind of caught on. We were written up in the New York Times and Salon and all kinds of magazines, Rolling Stones, and all kinds of stuff. So, and I travel the world giving lectures, and every time I go, they ask if I can bring the Amygdaloids. I say no, but I can bring my friend Colin, and so we play.
I mean, that's awesome. What's better than giving a speech about the amygdala, the brain, the four states of being, and then doing a little concert afterwards? Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
We got some videos on YouTube that like have 90,000 views, and it's been a great run.
Yeah, it's great.
And
do you have merch? Do you have Amygdaloids merch?
So we have merch. Yeah.
I'm gonna need a T-shirt.
Okay.
I need a T-shirt or a hat or something.
All right.
I think that'd be nice. Yeah, we'll rep the Amygdaloids in here. I think y'all would look good.
The thing is that's unique about us is we invented our own genre, heavy mental.
That's fire. I like that.
And everybody who reads it thinks, really, you play heavy metal?
That's great. Heavy mental is great. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, check out the music.
When's your next show in New York? When are you doing it?
It's we haven't had a show in New York in a long time. I'm playing in Rio.
Come on.
In June.
I'm not going to Rio. I can't make it to Rio.
Help us find a club. It's like so hard to go to a venue.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I got some ideas. We can cook something up.
Let's do a team thing. You do some comedy. We'll do some music.
Let me sing. Let me join the band. Come on. I can join the band. I can play
sing?
a little bit. I'm not trying to brag. But I can play some C chords. We can do some covers. We can do some obviously Amygdaloids originals. This will be great.
Good.
I'm looking forward to it.
Done deal.
Joseph, thank you so much for coming on, man.
You.
I really
It's been
appreciate
fun.
the time.
Yep.
Let's do this again soon.
Great time.